There is a particular kind of silence that surrounds someone deeply absorbed in fixing something. Not the silence of boredom and not the tense silence of frustration, but something closer to total presence. A person hunched over a disassembled appliance, a stalled engine, a loose hinge. Completely unaware of how much time has passed, entirely unbothered by the fact that the task is slow, fiddly, and offers no guarantee of success. Ask them what they're feeling in that moment, and most will struggle to answer clearly. They are not thinking about feelings. They are simply completely somewhere else inside the problem itself. This video is interested in that state, and in the broader psychological pattern it reveals. Because the people who love fixing things are not engaged in a minor hobby, easily dismissed as mechanical tinkering. They are expressing a coherent, identifiable psychological orientation, one that extends far beyond literal objects into how these same people approach relationships, careers, and the broken parts of their own lives. Before going further, it is worth widening the definition. The fixing instinct shows up in the person restoring a piece of broken furniture, certainly, but it shows up equally in the person who cannot leave a malfunctioning process at work unaddressed. The friend who instinctively tries to repair tension in a group before anyone else notices it exists. The partner who approaches a strained relationship not by walking away, but by quietly, persistently working to understand what broke and how it might be rebuilt. The mechanism beneath all of these behaviors is the same, only the material being fixed changes. To understand why this drive exists so strongly in certain people, psychology offers a specific and well-supported explanation rooted in what motivates human beings at a fundamental level. Self-determination theory, developed by psychologists Edward Desai and Richard Ryan, identifies competence as one of three core psychological needs essential to human well-being, alongside autonomy and relatedness. Competence in this framework refers to the basic human need to feel capable, effective, and skilled at navigating one's environment. Fixing something broken delivers an unusually direct, unambiguous satisfaction of this need. There is no ambiguity about whether the task succeeded. The appliance either works again or it doesn't. The hinge either stops squeaking or it doesn't. Few other activities offer such immediate, undeniable proof that a person's effort produced a real result. This clarity of feedback connects directly to a second, closely related psychological concept: flow. The state of complete absorption, first described in depth by psychologist Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi after decades of research into optimal human experience. Csikszentmihalyi identified several conditions necessary for flow to occur: clear goals, immediate feedback on progress, and a level of challenge precisely matched to a person's current skill level. Neither so easy that it produces boredom, nor so difficult that it produces anxiety. Repair work almost by structural accident satisfies all three conditions with unusual precision. The goal is obvious: make the broken thing work. The feedback is immediate: does it work now or not yet? And the challenge naturally scales to the person's skill, because they can choose projects that sit right at the edge of their current ability, expanding that ability gradually with each successful repair. This explains why fixing things so reliably produces the kind of deep, satisfying absorption that other activities, particularly passive ones, rarely match. It is not simply enjoyable. It is structurally engineered, almost by coincidence, to activate one of the most psychologically rewarding states human beings are capable of experiencing. From this foundation, several recognizable psychological profiles tend to emerge among people who are strongly drawn to fixing things, each oriented toward a slightly different aspect of the same underlying drive. There is the systems thinker, who is drawn primarily to understanding mechanism, how something works beneath its visible surface, what causes failure, and what sequence of adjustments restores proper function. For this person, fixing is fundamentally an intellectual pursuit, closely related to curiosity and pattern recognition. And the satisfaction comes largely from having correctly diagnosed an invisible problem. There is the restorer, whose primary motivation is less about mechanism and more about value and renewal, the specific satisfaction of giving continued life to something that others had already written off as worthless or beyond saving. For the restorer, the emotional core of the activity is almost protective, even moral. A quiet refusal to accept that something broken is automatically something disposable. And there is the quiet problem solver, for whom fixing functions less as an intellectual or restorative pursuit and more as a grounding. Regulating activity, a reliable way to quiet an overactive mind, manage stress, or process emotion indirectly through physical, tactile work rather than direct introspection. What unites all three profiles, despite their different emphases, is the same underlying truth. The love of fixing things is rarely, in the end, primarily about the object being fixed. It is about something the activity reliably provides, visible competence, restored order, and tangible, undeniable proof that focused effort, applied patiently over time, is capable of turning something broken back into something whole. There is a moment, familiar to anyone who fixes things regularly, that arrives just before the actual repair, the moment of taking something apart, laying its pieces across a table or workbench, and confronting the fact that it currently looks considerably worse than when the process began. This moment matters more than it appears to, because it represents something the fixer has learned, through repetition, that most people never fully internalize. That disorder is frequently a necessary stage on the way to genuine repair, not a sign that something has gone wrong. This single piece of internalized knowledge connects directly to the first profile worth examining more closely, the systems thinker, whose satisfaction comes primarily from understanding mechanism. What makes this profile particularly interesting is what it reveals about how they relate to failure itself. A systems thinker confronted with a broken object does not experience the malfunction as a setback to be tolerated. They experience it as information, a puzzle containing, somewhere within its structure, an answer that simply has not yet been found. This reframing of failure as data rather than defeat is not limited to literal mechanical problems. People with this orientation frequently approach failed plans, unsuccessful strategies, or breakdowns in personal systems the same way, not with frustration at what went wrong, but with curiosity about why, and confidence that the why is discoverable. The restorer's deeper motivation reveals something quietly significant about how this person relates to value and worth more broadly. Choosing to repair something that others have already discarded requires a specific kind of conviction, a belief that current condition does not determine final worth. And that visible damage does not mean something has become unsalvageable. This conviction, once examined closely, frequently extends well beyond furniture and machinery. People drawn strongly to restoration often display the same instinct toward people and situations that others have written off too quickly, a tendency to see potential where others see only the current damaged state, and a willingness to invest the patient effort required to help something difficult move toward something whole again. The quiet problem solver's relationship with fixing reveals perhaps the most personally significant pattern of the three, because it points toward something many people struggle to access through any other means, a reliable method for processing internal noise through external physical action. There is substantial research supporting the regulating effect of tactile, hands-on activity on anxiety and rumination. Work with the hands appears to engage attention in a way that gives an overactive mind something concrete to hold on to, reducing the space available for circular, unproductive thought. For the quiet problem solver, fixing something broken is rarely just about the object. It is frequently the most accessible, least intimidating form of therapy available to them, a way of metabolizing stress without ever having to name or directly confront its source. It is worth being precise about what current research actually supports here. Flow research, originating with Csikszentmihalyi and substantially developed since, offers strong, well-replicated support for the conditions that produce deep absorption and the psychological benefits that follow from regularly experiencing it. Research on competence as a core motivational need is similarly well established within self-determination theory. The connection between tactile activity and stress regulation has reasonable supporting evidence, though the precise mechanisms remain an active area of study. What should be treated as interpretive rather than strictly proven is the broader symbolic claim that a person's relationship with fixing objects directly mirrors their relationship with fixing relationships or themselves. This connection is psychologically plausible and frequently observed anecdotally, but it functions here as a meaningful lens for reflection rather than an established clinical finding. That lens, treated honestly as exactly that, still offers something valuable. The instinct to repair rather than discard, once developed through repeated practice on tangible objects, frequently becomes a transferable orientation toward difficulty in general. A person who has spent years patiently working through mechanical problems, tolerating the frustration of failed attempts, trusting that persistence eventually produces results. Refusing to declare something unfixable simply because the first 3 attempts did not work, has, in the process, built a broader capacity for sitting with difficulty without panic. This capacity does not stay contained to the workshop. It shows up in how a person handles a conflict that cannot be resolved in a single conversation, a career setback that requires rebuilding rather than abandoning, or a personal struggle that demands the same patient, iterative effort a stubborn engine once required. This is, in the end, the most transferable lesson the fixer's mindset has to offer. Broken does not mean finished, and slow progress is still progress. And the willingness to stay with a difficult problem long enough to actually understand it is itself a skill, one built gradually through direct practice. Exactly the same way any other meaningful skill is built. Before this video ends, consider your own relationship with the things in your life you would currently describe as broken, not just objects, but situations, relationships, or even parts of yourself you have quietly written off as unfixable. What do you tend to repair patiently, and what do you tend to abandon quickly? And looking honestly at that pattern, what might it be revealing about how much trust you currently place in your own ability to sit with a difficult problem long enough to actually see it through?